Hello, friends and neighbors, and Merry Christmas. Pappy Hondo here, and I've got something I wanted to share with you on this magical night. I've got a copy of Clement C. Moore's The Night Before Christmas, a version that was introduced to me in the 1970s when I was in high school, and I'd like to share that with you tonight. So if you would gather around, let old Pappy Hondo read you a story. It was the nocturnal segment of the diurnal period preceding that of our annual Yuletide celebration, and throughout our place of residence, kinetic activity was not in evidence among the possessors of this potential, including that species of domestic rodent known as mus musculus. The hosiery was meticulously suspended from the forward edge of the wood-burning caloric apparatus pursuant to our anticipatory pleasure regarding an imminent visitation from the eccentric philanthropist among whose folkloric appellations is the honorific title of St. Nicholas. The prepubescent siblings were comfortably ensconced in their respective accommodations of repose. They were experiencing subconscious visual hallucinations of variegated fruit confections moving rhythmically through their cerebrums. My conjugal partner and I, we were attired in our nocturnal head coverings and were about to take slumberous advantage of the hibernal darkness, when upon the arenaceous exterior portion of the grounds there ascended such a cacophony of dissonance that I felt compelled to arise with alacrity from my place of repose for the purpose of ascertaining the precise source thereof. Hastening to the casement, I forthwith opened the barrier sealing this fenestration, noting upon that the lunar brilliance without, reflected as it was on the surface of the recent crystalline precipitation, might be said to rival that of the solar meridian itself, thus permitting my incredulous optical sensory organs to behold a miniature airborne runnered conveyance drawn by 8 diminutive species of the genus Rangifer. Was piloted by a minuscule aged chauffeur so ebullient and nimble that it became instantly apparent to me that he was indeed our anticipated caller. With his ungulant motive power traveling at what may possibly have been more vertiginous velocity than patriotic alar predators, he vociferated loudly. He expelled breath musically through contracted labia and addressed each of the osset by his or her respective cognomen, now Dasher, now Dancer, et al. It was a big one. Guiding them to the uppermost exterior level of our abode, through which structure I could readily distinguish the concatenations of each of the 32 cloven petal extremities. As I retracted my cranium from its erstwhile location and was performing a 180-degree pivot, our distinguished visitant achieved, with utmost celerity and via a downward leap, entry by way of the smoke passage. He was clad entirely in animal pelts, soiled by the ebony residue from the oxidations of carboniferous fuels which had accumulated on the walls thereof. Love these pictures. His resemblance to a street vendor I attributed largely to the plethora of assorted playthings which he bore dorsally in a commodious cloth receptacle. His orbs were scintillant with reflected luminosity, while his submaxillary dermal indentations, well, they gave every evidence of engaging amiability. The capillaries of his molar regions and nasal appurtenance were engorged with blood which suffused in subcutaneous layers, the former approximating the coloration of Albion's floral emblem, and the latter, well, that of the Prunus avium, or the sweet cherry. His amusing sub and supralabials resembled nothing so much as a common loop knot, and their ambient hirsute facial adornment appeared like small, tabular and columnar crystals of frozen water. Clenched firmly between his incisors was a smoking piece whose gray fumes, forming a tenuous ellipse around his occiput, were suggestive of a decorative seasonal circlet of holly. His visage was wider than it was high, and when he waxed audibly mirthful, his corpulent abdominal regions undulated in a manner of impectinated fruit syrup in a hemispherical container. He was, in short, neither more nor less an obese, jocund, multigenarian, the optical perception of whom rendered me visibly frolicsome despite my every effort to refrain from being so. By rapidly lowering and then elevating one eyelid and rotating his head slightly to the side, he indicated that trepidation on my part was indeed groundless. Without utterance and with dispatch, he commenced filling the aforementioned appended hosiery with various of the aforementioned articles of merchandise extracted from his aforementioned, previously dorsally transported, cloth receptacle. Upon completion of his task, he executed an abrupt about-face. He placed a single manual digit in lateral juxtaposition of his olfactory organ, inclined his cranium forward in a gesture of leave-taking, and forthwith effected his egress by renegotiating, in reverse, the aforementioned smoke passage. He then propelled himself in a short vector onto his conveyance, directed a musical expulsion of air through his contracted oral sphincter to the antlered quadrupeds of burden, and proceeded to soar aloft in a movement hitherto observable chiefly among the seed-bearing portions of the common weed. But I overheard his parting exclamation, audible immediately prior to his vehiculation beyond the limits of my visibility, an ecstatic Yuletide to the planetary constituency, and to that self-same assemblage my sincerest wishes for a salubrously beneficial and gratifyingly pleasurable period between sunset and dawn. Well, that's a version of The Night Before Christmas, a classic by Clement C. Moore. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a great Christmas Eve and a very, very Merry Christmas. This is Pappy Hondo saying good night.